Uh, Calabrese, congrats on your start, but I have to say, I think it ends here. Total 51 and a half, 52. You like Miami. I think you're wrong, but I'll let you start off and make your case.
Sure. Let's get it started with the March Madness analogy I just had. You've seen these Cinderellas. Now, clearly, Ole Miss isn't a Cinderella by any basketball standards, but they weren't supposed to be here. And a lot of this has been driven on emotion, on spite, sticking it to Lane Kiffin, having the emotional home playoff win over Tulane, and then really playing a game of a lifetime against Georgia, who I mentioned they won it on the field, but if Georgia has a full deck there late in the game, I think they just give it to Frazier and get in the end zone. But the thing that interests me the most is now as they go, pack it all up, go across country again, they're in a position where who's coaching this team? Because Kevin Smith was out, but now he's back in. You have the passing game coordinator and Joe Cox, who's also the receiving coach. He's now down in Baton Rouge, the tight ends coach as well. You got Charlie Weiss, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I think there's a bit of a brain drain situation here, and I don't think that it can be overstated in a game like this because when I look at Miami and what they're bringing to the table in terms of coaching, Shannon Dawson has done an incredible job coaching them up. And when you look at what he was able to do against Ohio State defense that was elite, including that like fake quarterback draw swing pass in the red zone, I was very impressed with some of the wrinkles that he put on tape. But Corey Heatherman is the reason why I'm on the Canes in this game. If you lay 3.5, you can get even money out there in the market. He's done an incredible job. And when you look at that game flipping, pick six, that was coaching. That wasn't just a player just instinctually saying, I'm going to jump this route and potentially be out of position and give up a touchdown behind me. Scott was able to do that because he had seen that on tape. His position coach had coached him up, and Heatherman put him in a spot where he wanted him to be aggressive. And when you look at this Ole Miss offense, Chambliss is obviously the engine. But there's been a couple occasions where he's been pressured consistently, and all of a sudden the ceiling on this Rebel offense has come down a little bit. The two games I'd like to point to were Wazoo and Florida. Wazoo got home 3 times, but also created 11 pressures, nearly pull off, a catastrophic upset from an Ole Miss perspective as 33-point dogs. They end up losing by 3 in that game. And then Florida, a team that underwhelmed for the entire season, they were able to create 10 pressures in that game, and they were leading in the fourth quarter. So I think the game here is all in the trenches. And if you can consistently pressure Chambliss, you have an opportunity. And what does Miami have in spades? They have talent on both sides of the line, but particularly on the defensive side, best pass rush, havoc-minded front seven, and a ball hawking mentality, 25 takeaways, ninth in the entire country. So I think they're going to be able to get it done to, let's call it 24 points, keep them from absolutely exploding. I know that the recency bias of this is saying, well, if Georgia couldn't, keep him, at bay, what chance does anyone have? This just wasn't the Georgia team of yesteryear defensively. They struggled for long stretches of the season creating pressure, and you saw it just not being able to get to him. He was having these long extended plays that, you can't put it on your secondary to cover for 7 seconds. When it flips around, Miami has the football. We've given so much shit, rightfully so, to Mario Cristobal over the years of not being able to handle leads, of wilting down the stretch. But the coaching's been really strong in this playoff run. And I think it's pretty simple in that they were able to run the ball for 153 yards on the Silver Bullets at Ohio State, run defense. When you look at Ole Miss, they got to be licking their chops. 65th in rushing success rate defensively, but 92nd in line yards. I think this Miami line is going to punch open some big holes for Mark Fletcher, who, by the way, has elevated himself to 6th nationally per PFF in terms of running back grade. I think he's going to have a big game. I think he's going to get in the end zone. And if they can get to 27, 31 points, I think it's going to be enough. So I'm going to go with this being the situation where the Rebels' magical season finally dies in the desert. I play Miami up all the way to edge of a full touchdown if you're interested in maybe watching a drive or two, and then you have to take a discount in the opposite direction on a live number. I still think -6.5 is good with the Canes.
I completely disagree. I like Ole Miss here. I make this like 2.5, 2.55. So I like anything over a field goal, even like plus 3.5 -115. I think just right now we are, or many people in the market is underestimating Trinidad Chambliss. Like he's playing at, I don't know, like the way that it looks is he's playing at like a peak Lamar Jackson, peak like Kyler Murray in college level. As of right now, he's almost unpressurable. I mean, you look at their pressure rate, his sack rate, and that is the key to playing Miami. Miami's defense is predicated on Bain and Messidor wrecking havoc in the backfield. Because if they don't get home, this Miami team, they're aggressive under Heatherman, who's done a tremendous job. They will give up explosive plays. And Ole Miss is as capable of hitting explosive plays as any team in the country. I think Chambliss can buy enough time. I mean, you might have to scramble backwards 20 yards, but then this Miami secondary is gettable. Additionally, I think they're going to use super fast tempo. Bain, Mestor, we saw him during the 2 minute drill. Ohio State was a snail again. I think they can wear them down. That tempo is going to be a tool. And I just think right now, I have Ole Miss has the better offense. I mean, Miami's offense, what have they done? Fletcher broke like 2 runs in 2 games. Other than that, they didn't do anything. I think Beck has thrown for 220 yards in 2 games, and that's because they didn't have to do much because their defensive line wreaked havoc on both teams. And Reed was just bad, sane as a statue. That is not the case with Chambliss. Is Miami going to be able to run the ball? Absolutely. But they're not that explosive of a rushing attack, which I think will help Ole Miss. But Ole Miss is, I believe, they could always change their game plan. But schematically, what Ole Miss generally does under Golding is that they're going to play a ton of zone. They're going to play bend but don't break, don't give up anything explosive. And Miami's not an explosive offense, in generally speaking. They're gonna move the ball down the field. They're gonna be able to run the ball. And then Ole Miss is going to hope for stops in the red zone. But I think from an explosive play perspective, this is going to be so heavily tilted in Ole Miss's direction, and this can't be a game where Beck just manages the game and they just let him, let's just not let Carson Beck make mistakes. I think this is a game where Beck might make a couple key mistakes. I think Ole Miss can get some pressure, but I just think Chambliss right now is underrated. I think this is closer. This should be under a field goal, in my opinion, closer to a coin flip. And I have the special teams edge. Ole Miss might have the best special. I mean, they just outplayed Georgia special teams. I think as of right now, S&P plus they're number one in special teams now. I mean, Carnero is an absolute weapon. I still don't trust Miami's kicking situation. Additionally, more plays, more opportunities for this Miami team to mess up. Mario tried to mess up the A&M game by not going down at the one. But the discipline. Miami is one of the most undisciplined teams in the country. They're, I think, the 110th in penalties per game. Ole Miss around national average, around 55th, 60th. But this, to me, just comes down to Chambliss making plays, being able to evade that pressure, hitting explosive plays down the field. Ole Miss playing their bend but don't break, force Beck into a mistake or two. I think this game goes back and forth throughout. I additionally like the over. Now, what scares me is just if the game script where Miami. The other thing is, Ole Miss right now, what Golding has showed me is that he kind of has some Lane Kiffin in me. He's going to be aggressive. Um, and Miami, when they get leads and just in general, Mario will be a little bit more conservative. I like having the more aggressive coach in a high stakes game like this. But the thing that does scare me is because I do think Miami will be able to run the ball. They're not the most explosive team. Is just if they do indeed have these 6, 7 minute drives. Now this will help the Ole Miss side, but they end in a couple field goals. Then it might be tough to get this over. But I think that Ole Miss is going to control this pace, and then I think the Miami offense will look. They're going to have to open it up, and this is a much easier test than Ohio State. So I would look at the over as well. Colin, I made my case for Ole Miss. Calabrese made his case for Miami. You like, I guess, part of mine. You like Ole Miss in the first half.
Well, I have an 18-1 on Ole Miss future too, so I'm with you. But I think the better bet's the first half.
Duck. We forgot. It's like, did you take a nap? Sorry. Yeah, you've just been sitting back listening. Curious to get your thoughts. Colin kind of alluded to it. You like the first half under, but what are your thoughts on the side? We've been kind of arguing back and forth. Are you siding with Chambliss? Or are you siding with Beck and the Miami defensive line? What are your thoughts here?
Well, first off, I think we've seen two good data points now from Miami on what the game plan is that they're going to deploy, and I don't think they have to really go off script on that. So I don't expect Carson Beck to drop back and throw the ball around here a ton, specifically in the first half. I think Miami will be able to move the ball on the ground against Ole Miss's defensive front seven, and that's the path for them being methodical. It's not going to be a lot of pace, it's not going to be a lot of explosivity, but they will be methodical and they'll be able to possess the ball and move it on the ground. I was encouraged by Ole Miss's defensive front and how they played against Georgia, 2 sacks, 9 TFLs. So I think there's an ability for Ole Miss's defense to step up and stall these drives out, which will result in punts and long fields the other way. I'm worried about the Miami front. I think you look at a group that's got 48 sacks, 95 tackles for loss. We've already talked about the guys that are going to create a problem for Ole Miss, and I don't think the operation is going to look like it's looked all season for Trinidad Chambliss. I don't think he's going to be able to ad lib off the cuff when things go off schedule and just create plays like he's shown this ability to do. And that's not a knock on his play because he's been exquisite this year. But one thing that's real interesting here is these first couple of games for Ole Miss, playing with a truncated staff and a hodgepodge of different players coaching at the various different position groups, is they had already played Tulane, they had already played Georgia. You really only had to roll out a partial install for the opponents that they were playing during these first couple of playoff games. Now with a full prep install and an abbreviated staff, and you've got all these guys that are doing different things and exerting bandwidth to their new job and trying to stay focused. I just worry about how things show up, like pass protection, and if we get the right shift from the running back to pick up the blitz, or if that gets missed, or does a receiver have to alter the way that his route is run due to the coverages he's going to see? Well, that all comes out in the install practices leading up to. Now you've got a one less day to do that with the way that the game schedule played out, and you're installing against an opponent you hadn't faced, which they have not had to do yet during this playoff run. That's why I think the first half could look a little wonky. I think these guys are going to have to get some snaps under their belt, get into the half and make some adjustments, at which point, sure, all hell could break loose. But I think we've seen the game plan for Miami. They've only had one offensive touchdown scored in the first half of both of their two playoff games combined, 0-0 against A&M, 14-0 against Ohio State. And I just feel like it's going to take a little while for Ole Miss with this. It's just going to be such an unprecedented situation with the lack of coaching staff and the lack of consistency week to week. I think it's trouble.
How about from the side perspective? Who do you think eventually comes out on top?
I think Miami is the only team that would have a reasonable chance to challenge Oregon or Indiana, and I think that that defensive line is just playing too well right now. So I will give a tiny lean to the Canes.
All right, should be a good one. Regardless, I can't wait to watch it.